Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is Funeral Service Insider from Kates-Boylston. Each episode features conversations about emerging trends and news that affect the death care industry. We talk to people who understand the delicate balance of change in a profession and vocation steeped in tradition. This week, I'm speaking with Amanda Marie Eilis King. She is a funeral director and embalmer, and we're going to talk about collecting and reviewing children's books on death, which she's been doing and reviewing for American Funeral Director magazine. King also provided all the original art for Turning Art into Science, Applying Chemistry to Funeral Service, which is a new chemistry book if you haven't heard about it. It's specifically for mortuary schools. And that's also in this month's American Funeral Director if you're a subscriber. If not, link in the show notes. The cool thing about her book project is it focuses on death, but not with a particular religious bent. It is for everybody. It's accessible for everybody. She is such an interesting guest. I think you're going to really enjoy this show. As always, please stay after for the post-mortem. This week, we're going to take a look at our new podcast, which is In Case You Missed It. As always, remember that you can contact me in the show notes if you have any show suggestions or feedback. Love to hear it. And we're going to get to the conversation with Amanda right after these words from our sponsor, Homesteaders Life. Trust, reliability, security. These are all things funeral home businesses look for in a pre-need funding provider. So it's only natural that Homesteaders Life Company comes to mind first. Homesteaders leadership has been committed to always doing the right thing for their policy owners and funeral home customers. It's the way they've done business since 1906 and one of the many reasons that Homesteaders is the most often used pre-need funding company in America. In fact, Homesteaders has been consistently highly rated in financial strength by AM Best Company, most recently an A-, which is considered excellent. Their strategic approach to investments combined with their long-term financial security has allowed Homesteaders to increase growth rates for their customers for the second time within the past year. Following an increase of 30 basis points in March 2023, Homesteaders announced yet another increase of an average 60 basis points over current levels for all new businesses, and an increase of 6 basis points over current levels for in-force business for currently sold products. These growth rate increases offered by Homesteaders are among the highest from nationally ranked pre-need providers. Unlike some of their competitors, Homesteaders' most recent growth rate increases apply to all new business, not just a small subset of products. Successful firms look for a reliable pre-need funding partner with financial strength and a proven track record to ensure sustainability and help provide a much-needed service for their client families. But there are many other benefits that a strong funding partner can provide to help their businesses flourish. Homesteaders understands that when it comes to pre-need, one size fits all isn't the best fit. That's why they work with you to design pre-need programs that are custom-built for your business, not anyone else's. Visit homesteaderslife.com today to personalize your pre-need program with Homesteaders. So it's not often that I get something really juicy in the pre-interview chit-chat, but you just mentioned that you do printmaking as well as all the other things that you do. So can you tell me a little bit about your college career and how you got from printmaking to funeral directing?
Yeah, of course. So my background is art, very heavily art, biology. I have a postbac degree in printmaking. I actually own my own CMP letterpress machine from the late 1800s that I do custom work on still. I absolutely love it. And the connection of letterpress, especially CMP letterpress machines to funeral service is back in the day, that's what they used to make the prayer cards on. or
Ah,
folders. And some really old funeral homes actually still have some in their basements or storage. And I've actually reached out to a few to see if I could rescue them.
do they always know what they are, or do they just say we have some
No,
weird machine downstairs?
no, they won't always know what they are. And then they'll be like, we found all these small wooden blocks with it. And I'm like, oh, that's called furniture. That's what you use to kind of put together with all the little metal letters and insets to actually create the text that you'll be printing.
That is absolutely fantastic. As someone who's gone from print to digital journalism, I still do a little bit of print, but mostly I do digital. I can appreciate the whole layout process. What interested you in that? I mean, artists don't need to be interested in art. Artists need to be let to do art. I understand that. But how did you get away with doing art and biology?
I was just allowed to, I guess, I went to Skidmore for my undergrad. And I was just allowed to explore the classes, having gone to a liberal arts college. You have a lot more freedom to kind of network out there and see what other, subjects and topics are and how they influence each other. When I was there, biology heavily influenced me, heavily interested me. And so it affected my art very much so. And at the time, my dad was sick with cancer and we were getting a lot of scans, body scans of his. And
Mm-hmm.
I was translating them into prints, into intaglio prints actually at the time, which is etching in acid. So I hadn't found letterpress yet. And I went from that to screen printing, which I still do. And some people know I have an Etsy shop. I illustrate fun mortuary things and then hand screen print them to sell. But then when I went to MICA in Baltimore for art school
Yeah.
afterwards, and I found myself in the letterpress department. And the rest is history. I apprenticed at a print shop in Silver Spring, Maryland, and I befriended an elderly lady. And a lot of elderly ladies go into print shops, I've discovered. It's what you do when you retire and your husbands have all passed away, apparently. But there was a rainy night one night and she didn't feel comfortable driving home alone. So I followed her home and she showed me that she had her own letterpress machine and her husband had built this room for it because it's like 1,800 pounds and it was on
Wow.
skids. And so her and I became friends. And then I was about to move out of state and she was going to sell her letterpress machine because she was getting too old. And a gentleman was going to come buy it for his wife. And I guess he came by and she slept on it that night. And she woke up the next day and said she wasn't selling it. And she gifted it to me.
Huh.
I had to I paid the small amount just so she could write off for taxes, I think. But under the premise that I then pass it on once I'm done. And I don't know if she's still alive or not, to be honest. I have not kept in touch with her. But one other part of it was you have a special brush to clean the metal letters. That was passed on to her by someone promising that she would pass it on. And so now I too will do that. And it's not death related by any means, but the
No, but
idea of passing things on when we leave this earth, I think it's so beautiful.
I don't want to say better than tradition, but it's a different approach to tradition. One of the, in the rising end of life kind of industry, one of the things we just ran a story not too long ago about the Swedish death cleaning or something, I think it's called, where you say, this is important to me and this is why I want it kept, or this is why I want you to know why it was important to me. And then you can decide to keep it or not. But this idea of intentionally handing something special down through the ages is, it's absolutely wonderful. You're fortunate, and I'm a little jealous. I'm not going to lie.
Well, you can come see it anytime and work on it. It works. Actually, it originally had a foot treadle, which is how they're built. But my mom surprised me, and friends of mine from high school came and worked on it while I was away one time and put a motor on it. So now it's even more efficient.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so how from there to mortuary school?
I actually, so I'll throw you for a loop again. I fell into teaching Montessori education to toddlers and primary level, so kindergarten age, for several years. And while I was doing this, and this will become relevant later on, I was also tattooing at the same time. So I started using my art background that way by working at a tattoo shop. I apprenticed and then I was taking in, clients. And then I moved states. I hop around from state to state quite often and continued teaching Montessori. And it was in Denver and the pay was horrible compared to the cost of living. And I was tired of bartending at night. And so I was like, I want to go back to school. What degrees, can make a lot of money and I can get done fairly quick because I have, all this bio background essentially. And I saw mortuary science pop up. It was at a
Wow.
community college right down the street. It wasn't going to cost me much of anything. I could get it done in 1 year. And I thought field directors made a ton of money. And then I learned the reality. But I fell in love with it. I did the classes and I fell in love with the restorative art aspect, which I think many people do. And I was told point blank in school that, people don't do it anymore. And I challenged that as soon as I was done. And when I met Vernie and I started getting heavily into doing the reconstruction and restorative aspects.
May I ask how long ago you went to school in Colorado?
That was circa, get my brain. I'm sorry. I just had a baby 2 months ago, so I have severe mom brain.
I know. And for everyone who's listening, we were also recording this kind of quietly and late at night. So.
Yes. Don't jinx it. That was circa 2016, I believe.
I just interviewed Faith Haug. Did you
She took
know her?
over. I know her through being out in Colorado, but Martha Thayer ran the program when I was there.
And she's the new head of the mortuary school there, and you can check out the latest issue of Funeral Service Insider for that story.
Yes.
And so that is a kind of the tragedy of restorative arts, are the people who are so into it and who do it so well are many, and the opportunities really are kind of declining.
Yeah, there's a toss-up on it. I think part of it is we see a separation of those embalmers and reconstructionists that are in the back room and they're not meeting with families. So they're not able to fight for their case on show their confidence of what they can do. And also, I don't feel like we're fully taught the appropriate language to talk to families or have the confidence again to speak to them about, what you can do without it being graphic, but to let them know, I can make it so you can see your loved one again. And I've worked in a care center. I've worked for mom and pop funeral homes. And that's one thing I really like about the smaller funeral homes where you do the transfer, you meet with the family, you do the arrangements, you do the embalming, is that you're with them all the way through. So you build that trust, but also they're confident when you tell them, I really think we should do it this way. And I really think this would help so that you could see them again. If you're a funeral director and you're not in the back or you don't work with the bodies, sometimes that's hard to do.
On the upside, if I can paint a little bit of a brighter picture, increasingly I'm talking to people, and as funeral service in general starts to embrace, I went from newspaper publishing to funeral service. It's just people who will not accept that time moves forward. But as they embrace cremation, I think more funeral directors are saying, just because there's nothing wrong with cremation, and also you can have a viewing and still have cremation, and that's something that I think is going to kind of bounce back a little bit for those reasons. Now that funeral directors are more open to having families who just want cremation or who want cremation.
Well, and the fun fact that I love to mention when I'm presenting in different states, even if it's a state that doesn't have it yet, is that if a family chooses aquamation, water cremation, you can still embalm the decedent beforehand. Like that can still occur. And many people don't know that. So, that's partially on us to continue spreading the correct information for all these new dispositions as well.
Absolutely. That's the beginning of the story. One of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you, as I mentioned in the intro, is you've been doing these great.
Yeah, we got very off topic.
Well, I didn't know. Like I said, you threw me for a loop with being like too interesting right off the bat. What got you into collecting these books? So for people who you've been doing book reviews of how children can deal or can accommodate grief. And what drew you to that?
So that would go back, and this is why I mentioned teaching Montessori. That definitely goes back to that aspect of my life. I've worked with toddlers, 2 and 3 year olds, 4 or 5 year olds. And in the toddler class for Montessori, we teach the life cycle in the springtime. So that's fresh 3 year olds learning it. Of course, we talk about with like the life cycle of a plant and
Right.
stuff. However, working with children that young, I was well aware, like they get these concepts. They totally understand. If you're honest with them, they get it. And that's one thing that I followed through with my daughter. I have a 4.5-year-old as well. I was very honest with her about my job, what I do. She's seen deceased people. We had our dog die when she was 2. She can tell you what happened. She knows that she's dead. She's not sleeping. So knowing through experience that these people this age can handle this type of topic, when a lot of people say like, they can't, they don't understand, or, or they question like, should we bring their daughter or son to come see them? And I'm always like, absolutely. Yes, they understand it. They get it. They need to touch them and see them, and have that experience. But the books, I am not very religious. People that have worked with me on funerals know that I will probably always mess up a church service, which is fine. That's not my forte. But a lot of those books about death traditionally mention some sort of religious aspect. And especially with teaching in a Montessori setting where there is no religious background, you have to have more tools at your fingertips to talk about different things. So I started searching out books for kids in that young, age 3 age range to talk about death, where God, please don't mention God or heaven or, something along those lines. And I found a few that I loved. And then of course, at the end, it's always like, they went up to heaven. And I'm just like, oh, it was so good. Can I just tear out that one page? But during COVID, I noticed people hunkered down, young people hunkered down and wrote and illustrated fantastic books. And it's just the tip of the iceberg of what I've been able to find and review.
The books that you recommend, and there is a monthly column in American Funeral Director. If anyone's interested in seeing it, it's also available online. It's not anti-religious. It just allows death to be a thing unto itself, which it is.
Yeah, right.
And this notion that you can bring it to a child, and some of them are very pointedly the one. So everyone, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but once people find out that you deal with the funeral industry, even if you're only a mere reporter, they want to know all the fun stuff that I get to do. And the title that you reviewed that I didn't like the best, but I think it kind of gets at the kind of books that you're able to find. It's called What Happened to Daddy?
That one is a gem. That one, I wish I could, I should reach out to the author and personally thank her, because more books like that are needed.
Can you tell no one here knows about it but me. So tell everyone about the book and why it's so awesome.
Yeah. So the book is called What Happened to Daddy's Body. It's by a woman whose husband died, and she wrote it with her children, essentially. And in the article that I wrote for the magazine, I caution people to go onto YouTube and look it up, because she does a reading of it so that you are aware of what's in the book before you just go buy it and read it to your kid without realizing, oh crap, I wasn't ready to have this type of conversation
Right.
or be this in depth. But it's about cremation and a full service. So her husband passes away, and it wants to be cremated. And there are illustrations of the service and what happens to the body going into the retort. And she talks about, the body stops working because the children were worried it was going to hurt him. The fire was going to hurt him. And so they have the whole discussion of, well, your body stops working, your organs stop, your body doesn't feel anything. But it gets very, very in-depth. And then afterwards, it shows the cremated remains, and they start thinking about different things that they could do with it. They explore planting it or spreading the ashes. And then I'm not sure if you actually read the book or watched it on YouTube. It goes on even, mom meets someone else. And what's it look like, a parent meeting someone else, not trying to take the place of their father. It's quite a long book, but it's so good because, we have, there's, I think 1 or 2 books I've seen mention cremation, but it doesn't dare go into here's the retort, the body's going in, well, and there's the flames.
And what's important about that, again, is one of the downsides of secularization, if we I'll call it secularization, is that people think that there's no pattern for the ritual. There's no way to go about it, but that's not the case. It's just you have to be open to ways of going about it. And there isn't this hard line as either you get cremated and put in a plastic box or you have a 4-hour funeral at the basilica, right? There is some sort of middle ground where you can find a way to process and honor a death that doesn't have to be religious, although it could be.
And I should mention too, I also think that's very much an American view. A lot of these books, if you research the authors or illustrators, they're from Europe or Australia, other parts of the world. One of the best books I read, I think it's called The Dream Den. It was by, I want to say, I'm just going to get it wrong. It's a Danish or Norwegian
That's okay.
author.
Link in the show notes.
He couldn't find someone to publish it in English, but he sent me a PDF of it. And he's like, if it will ever help any family that you serve, just print it off and give it to them. And it's about two brothers, and one is dying slowly in the hospital, and the other brother is scared, and he hides under the hospital bed, and what he envisions the doctors are like, and his brother's body after it's dead in the hospital. It's fantastic, but it's not English. It's not by an American person at all. I think people outside America are able to take it a step further and be more honest than we are here in the U.S.
Was that one of the books that you reviewed in that first column? Because that sounds familiar. I feel like you reviewed a book about a sibling dying in the first column.
I did. That one was called Remembering
Right,
Ethan.
that's what it was.
That's a different one. They don't actually show his death or anything. But it's talking about, that one talks more for the surviving siblings' viewpoint of the parents that are deep in grief and how it's affecting her, because it's putting a lot extra feelings on her because they're not being able to pay attention because they're so deep in grief.
And you give me the impression, or I got the impression from your writing, that if funeral directors don't, they ought to have some sort of library that of resources like this. I don't know how common it is. I don't go into funeral homes as often as I should, I guess. But is that, yeah,
that might be a good thing.
But is that something that people should do? Should they build libraries for children? Well, for people in general.
I think I would love to see that. Yeah, for anyone, like the little book libraries that you see out on the street corner. Imagine if each funeral home had one. That would be awesome. I personally would love to see that. I had a personal experience. A family I served several years ago. They had several children, and one child passed away, and the father was the main caregiver. And so they came in and they did an assisted dressing with me. They painted her nails. We put all her toys in her cremation container. We put her in her dress up outfit. And it was a really beautiful afternoon that I spent with them. And it made them feel a lot better because they didn't want to see her. This is an example, again, where it was going to be a direct cremation. And I knew she was sick in the hospital for a while and she didn't look like herself. And I convinced them, please let me embalm her. If you're not happy or for some reason, we're not going to charge you. I'm not trying to get money out of you. I'm doing this because I think this will help you and her siblings. And afterwards, they were so grateful. They spent hours with her and her body. And she was just the beautiful, most precious little girl that I had recommended some of these books to them. This is back in the early days of when I was starting to just research them. And as a thank you, they purchased a bookshelf and they put a plaque on it with their daughter's picture and wrote in memory of her. And they bought 5 copies of 10 different books that I recommended to them so that other kids could have them and be helped too. And it was like, I just was bawling my eyes out when it arrived. I was like, what is this? They're like, we got you your library. And I was like, oh my God.
When the author, scholar Umberto Eco, his library has been making the rounds on the internet. I don't know if you've seen it. And his thing was the idea that you should have read all of the books in your possession was anathema to him. He's like, you need a research library around you. You need books that you might one day be interested in to have handy. And this that makes me think of it like these are the kind of books that you do want to have around, I think, as a funeral director, or you may want to have around as a funeral director, depending upon the kind of services you provide. But giving families this opportunity to embrace with the grief process. I really also feel like that's the next step for now that they've admitted that cremation is a thing. I think
Yeah.
more grief counseling and mixing grief counseling in with aftercare a little bit better is something that's going to be on the rise in funeral service.
And I hope it is too, honestly.
It's a great opportunity to change. The upside is it's a great opportunity to reimagine the entire industry. I mean, slowly, yes, but eventually something. We have to admit that we die. We have to admit that we die and we don't know what happens. And we have to do that in a public way, like you said, because the advantages that these European writers have is they can address death face on and use the directness to lighten the load.
And just be honest. I mean, there's a much bigger sense of honesty when I've traveled over there and went into funeral homes and worked alongside other colleagues, other funeral directors over there. There's just a whole different air to it. It's not like it needs to be hidden, like it feels like it has to be here.
Dr. Jennifer Wright Berryman, Associate Professor of Social Work at the University of Cincinnati's School of Social Work, the College of Allied Health Sciences, will be one of the experts presenting at the upcoming Kates-Boylston Funeral Service Business Plan Conference, held June 4th and 5th at the Crowne Plaza Hotel in Warwick, Rhode Island. She'll be presenting the funeral business and the LGBTQIA+ community, barriers and solutions to building a partnership. We spoke with Wright Berryman about her upcoming presentation, and she talked to us about some work that she's been doing that involves studying the disconnect between how people say they're going to react with the LGBTQ community and how they actually do.
My very first study was just, marketing, advertising, messaging, signaling to the LGBTQ community that if there are special needs involved, whether it's prearrangement or handling of a body or the memorial or ceremony, we can talk about those. And so that explicit messaging needs to be there for the LGBTQ community to be safe, yet it's not happening. Yet, we've got thousands and thousands and thousands of LGBTQ people working in the funeral industry.
You can read the rest of this story and also sign up for this event at Kates-Boylston.com. Click the link below. Another thing that happened to me in the last couple of days is I read your column that's coming out. I guess is it out in April or is it coming out in May? It's just one book and then kind of a how to use this book guide. I thought that was fantastic. Yep. I wasn't expecting it. I did wonder how many 10-book columns you were going to be able to write.
Oh, surprise. We talked about doing a small, essentially a resource for each month. I probably have at least 50 books now. I could easily ramble off. And then I went to the library yesterday and found 3 more. So there are just constantly more and more books coming out now that you could use as a resource. And I just would like to get people aware of them. But I wanted to do essentially a resource guide, just besides people knowing that they're out there, but how they can go one step further with their families they're serving, to help them, even if it's just cutting it out of the magazine and giving it to the family member or photocopying it. I wanted to make it very accessible and very usable for them.
And I was excited about that, and I'm excited about the ongoing feature for that reason, because the first column was fantastic. It was all these 200-word synopsises and what makes the book good. But this idea of a longer kind of, and here are some ideas for how you can share this book with families, I think will make it. I think funeral directors will really appreciate it. It's not merely a recommendation. It's a recommendation with a little bit of enthusiasm, I guess.
Yeah, I did essentially a few questions or things that they can think about or caregivers can discuss with the child. And then I wanted to do an activity or something more hands-on or creative if there are children that, maybe they don't like to express themselves verbally, but they are more into the arts or music or something tangible. So yes, funeral directors, please photocopy it or just pretend you wrote it and send an email to your families, and just I'll be in the background feeding words into your ears.
And so then I turned that page and you showed up in another story. You've also, using your art background, done the art in the second edition of Turning Art into Science, which is the chemistry book, the dominant chemistry book, the chemistry book they use for the exam, as a matter of fact. How did that come about? How did they find you?
Yeah, Damon and I got connected through Martha Thayer way back when I was coming out of, finishing up mortuary school. Yeah, we've kind of collaborated on different projects over the years. And then when they were working on the second edition and making editorial changes and whatnot, they approached me about illustrating it just to bring it a little bit more to life. And they knew I was going to jump on the opportunity, and I did. However, it took me several years. There's over 80 illustrations, and I'm sure I dragged it out for them, which I have always felt bad for. But it was a dream come true. So when I was applying to colleges back when I was in high school, I actually was looking up, I wanted to become a medical illustrator. Like, that was what I wanted to go to school for. And back then, all the medical illustration programs had switched to become computer-based. So I had to learn how to draw digitally. The only one that was still allowing classes by hand was like in Wisconsin. And I was like, I don't want to move to Wisconsin. No offense to Wisconsin. But my dad was sick at the time too. So I wanted to be somewhat close by in case something happened that I could get home quickly. So that was always a dream of mine, was to illustrate a textbook. And they unknowingly at the time let me fulfill my dream. And like, when I got that textbook in my hands, once they mailed it to me, I just like completely broke down into tears, because that was like, I was like, life is complete. I can be done now.
Well, they were very complimentary. I didn't see any of the art. If they gave us any art for the story, I haven't seen that yet. I only saw the words, but they were very complimentary about the job you did on that. And so much so that they gave you your own book contract, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. The drawings, so I sent a bunch of photos in of some of the illustrations. So hopefully some of those make it to print. We have one picture where we fanned them all out on the floor and tried to get a giant group shot of all of them. But that's where my tattoo background came in. So when I come to illustrate items, I do it as if I'm going to tattoo them onto someone. And I'm very linear. I was trained in a traditional tattoo shop where, you should have 1/8 of an inch between every line. So when someone's 90, you can still tell what's on their body as all the wrinkles sag together. So my artwork's heavily linear when I illustrate things. And because of that, I suggested to them, I first asked them, I was like, what type of paper is this printed on? And they thought it was a weird question. And they're like, just normal paper. I was like, it's not glossy. They're like, no. I was like, let's turn it into a coloring book then. Like, let people because there's adult coloring books now, and like people need a break and, to have a little bit of fun. And so they ran with the idea. They accepted it, and which is even more fun. So we've been encouraging people that have the new textbook, take a break, color some of my drawings, go get one tattooed on you. Who knows?
Well, I'm sorry for re-asking the question. I was under the impression that it was also printed separately. That's not the case. It's only, if you want to color it, you have to buy the textbook.
Yes, we've got some other projects under our wings coming up. But yes, if they would like to color my 80 drawings, they are in the textbook, the second edition.
That's absolutely fantastic. We are up against it. I kept you longer than I promised I would, and I'm sorry, but you ended up being more interesting than you promised you were going to be. So I guess fair is fair. But before we go, I always like to ask if there's anything that I didn't ask that you thought I would, or if there's something that I should have asked or given you the opportunity to say and I didn't provide it.
I don't know. No, I'm very grateful that you're able to bring this story a little bit to life, and hopefully some people hear this and go check out the articles or look online to see the monthly book that I pick out, because there'll be some surprising ones. It's funny, we mentioned, staying away from religion, but then I search out some religious books, like, some Jewish books, and even one about Hmong families.
Wow.
Because where I'm at, we serve a lot of Hmong families, and who would know there's a children's book about death for Hmong families. So I really just wanted to gather a bunch of resources and just put them out for other field directors to be successful with families.
Very well. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Tony.
Trust, reliability, security. These are all things funeral home businesses look for in a pre-need funding provider. So it's only natural that Homesteaders Life Company comes to mind first. Homesteaders leadership has been committed to always doing the right thing for their policy owners and funeral home customers. It's the way they've done business since 1906 and one of the many reasons that Homesteaders is the most often used pre-need funding company in America. In fact, Homesteaders has been consistently highly rated in financial strength by AM Best Company, most recently an A-, which is considered excellent. Their strategic approach to investments combined with their long-term financial security has allowed Homesteaders to increase growth rates for their customers for the second time within the past year. Following an increase of 30 basis points in March 2023, Homesteaders announced yet another increase of an average 60 basis points over current levels for all new businesses, and an increase of 6 basis points over current levels for in-force business for currently sold products. These growth rate increases offered by Homesteaders are among the highest from nationally ranked pre-need providers. Unlike some of their competitors, Homesteaders' most recent growth rate increases apply to all new business, not just a small subset of products. Successful firms look for a reliable pre-need funding partner with financial strength and a proven track record to ensure sustainability and help provide a much-needed service for their client families. But there are many other benefits that a strong funding partner can provide to help their businesses flourish. Homesteaders understands that when it comes to pre-need, one size fits all isn't the best fit. That's why they work with you to design pre-need programs that are custom-built for your business, not anyone else's. Visit homesteaderslife.com today to personalize your pre-need program with Homesteaders. Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. I say it every week, and every week you respond, so I'm going to keep on saying it. Make sure you follow us wherever you're listening to this podcast now. Make sure you tell someone if you think they'll like it, because if you like it, they'll probably like it too. And finally, check the show notes, because that's where you can get in touch with me and give me feedback. That is where you can find links to all of the articles we mentioned in the show. Also, if any of you go to the Warwick, Rhode Island event, I will be there, so please make sure you let me know if you're a listener. I think that would be awesome to talk to you about it, and you could give me personal feedback whether you like the show or... I feel like it's unlikely that you hate the show and you still got 7 minutes in, but if you did, let me know. And now, for the postmortem. I usually don't like to do commercially kind of stuff in this section, but it's important only because I surprised you as I surprised pretty much all of my colleagues with the show last week, or I guess I should say the extra show. So every week I collect stories from around the internet, and some of them turn into stories for this show, some of them turn into stories for American Funeral Director, American Cemetery, for Funeral Service Insider, the newsletter, and some of them just don't fit, or I'm not going to have time to do a deep dive, but I feel like you need to know them. So I put them in a section that we call In Case You Missed It. We've started adding that to our YouTube page as well as to our podcast. So I do a video news type show every Friday afternoon. It comes out actually Friday mornings, hopefully, but certainly by Friday afternoon it is out. So you should subscribe. Of course, if you don't want to look at my dumb face, just keep subscribed here and you can listen and pretend that I'm less red than I come off on video. That'll do us for this week, and we will see you next time on Funeral Service Insider, the podcast.